A Billion Good Deeds, Chapter 1, The Man on the Bench. He came back to the place he swore he'd never return, not for revenge and not for closure, but because a quiet part of him needed to hear the old building breathe. Mercy, General Hospital in Jackson, Mississippi, wore the night like a heavy coat. The fluorescent lights hummed low, the air vents whispered, and the polished floors held the shine of 1,000 endings. It was close to midnight. In the waiting room by the vending machines, a man in a wrinkled hoodie sat bent forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed like he was listening for something under the noise. Clarence Washington pushed his mop bucket down the far corridor, the wheels squeaking in a rhythm his hands knew better than prayer. He was working his last shift. 40 years of clean floors and quiet kindness, and still he took the corners slow, like the building might decide to surprise him. His back had a conversation going with his knees. His knees weren't polite. On his way past the vending machine, he caught the shape of the man on the bench and stopped. The man's sneakers didn't match. The left one had a torn seam, the right one had a frayed lace knotted tight. His hoodie had seen better days and worse ideas. He didn't look up, but his breathing said he was awake. The hospital had plenty of ghosts. This one still had a pulse. "You good there, brother?" Clarence asked, voice low so it wouldn't echo. The man lifted his head. His eyes were clear, not cloudy. There was a calm in them that didn't belong to a person sleeping in public. He wasn't dangerous, he wasn't harmless either. He looked like someone deciding which memory to hold and which one to put down. "Just thirsty," he said. Clarence thought about the break-room fridge. There was one bottle left, the kind he saved to make the walk home easier. He thought about how the night heat would press on his chest like a hand when he hit the bus stop. He also thought about how many times he had been the man nobody looked at. None of those thoughts took long. "Wait right here," he said, as if the man had somewhere else to go. He came back with the bottle and set it in the stranger's palm like a coin you didn't ask back for. The man unscrewed the cap slow, like he didn't want to disrespect the gift, and drank in careful swallows, eyes on Clarence as if the water might run if he blinked. "You always give away what's yours?" the man asked. Clarence shrugged. "Sometimes the Lord doesn't send storms, he sends folks on benches." The man smiled with one side of his mouth, the way men smile when they agree and don't want the agreement to show. He put the cap back on and held the bottle like proof. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clarence," he said, "Washington." The man nodded, like that name sat right on his tongue. "Thank you, Mr. Washington." Clarence could have asked for his name back, like people do when they think they should make even. He didn't. He had learned a long time ago that not every kindness needed to be filed and stamped. He pushed his bucket on, the wheels complaining in the same old song, and left the man to his thoughts. Down the hall, the elevator doors opened and closed, carrying night shift nurses with tired jokes and soft hands. Somewhere, a monitor beeped, slow and stubborn. From the chapel, a faint piano note drifted out and faded, as if somebody had put a finger on a key just to feel something steady. You could live a whole life in this place and never see daylight. Clarence had done his time here. 40 years cleaning up what other people left behind. Blood one day, spilled coffee the next. He always treated both with the same respect. He finished the east wing and circled back. The bench was still occupied. The man had straightened up. He wasn't sleeping anymore. He was watching the door to the ER like he expected someone to walk through, and he needed to be ready. That look had weight to it. It said this building owed him a moment, maybe more. "You come here for somebody?" Clarence asked. "For myself," the man said, "for something I lost." Clarence didn't press. Loss had its own locks. He wiped the edge of the baseboard with the slow care of a craftsman and let the silence decide how big it wanted to be. When he finished the last corner, he leaned on the handle of his mop and let the room soften into focus. The candy machine with the stuck bag of chips, the old TV playing the news without sound, the stack of community newsletters by the plastic plant. He had passed these things so many times they felt like family you didn't mind ignoring. "You retiring?" the man asked, noticing the small helium balloon tied to the bucket handle. Someone in HR had shoved it into his hand at clockout and called it a celebration. "Tonight," Clarence said. "Bus ride home in the morning, and that's that. You got plans for tomorrow?" "Cut the grass if my knees vote yes. Maybe plant marigolds if they don't." "Marigolds," the man repeated, like he was testing the word for a hidden door. "Those your wife's favorite?" Clarence looked at him then. Folks assume like that when they've learned to read the small prints of a life. He tapped his chest pocket where a picture lived. She liked the way they looked brave. Said they were cheap flowers with rich hearts. The man's eyes softened. "Sounds like a good woman." "She was," he said, "still is some days." The man nodded, and the room seemed to settle around the things both of them had not said. Outside, a siren approached and then passed by, chasing someone else's disaster. Inside, the vending machine rattled once and went quiet again, like a throat clearing in a church. "Thank you for the water," the man said. "Nothing to it," Clarence answered, and he meant it. But part of him felt the shape of something starting. He didn't know if it was the end of a chapter or the first page of the next, only that the air in the room moved different now, like somebody had cracked a window. He emptied his mop bucket, wrung out the mop head one last time, and leaned the handle in its corner. The muscle memory in his hands tried to make him keep going, but the clock said he was done. He walked back toward the bench to say a simple goodbye, a habit his mother had called good manners and his wife had called a blessing. The bench was empty. The man had disappeared without a door opening. Only the water bottle remained, cap on, half full, standing straight on the metal seat like a small promise. Clarence stood there a moment longer than he had to, then took the bottle and set it on the windowsill where the morning sun could find it. He told himself it didn't matter who the man was. He told himself that some nights were just nights. Then he clocked out, stepped into the heavy Mississippi dark, and let the warm air wrap him in its old rough blanket. The bus came late and coughed when it stopped. He climbed aboard, sat in the first open seat, and watched the city slide by in pieces. The barber shop with the single light on in back, the diner where the night cook smoked by the dumpster, the church signboard promising Sunday grace at 11. He felt the tired in his bones and the stubborn in his heart. He thought about marigolds again and how they would look against his cracked front steps. He thought about the man's clear eyes and how some faces you remember before you decide to. At home, the porch boards creaked their familiar hello. The house settled itself around him, the way old houses do when they know your walk. He put his lunch pail on the kitchen counter, lined up his boots by the door, and washed his hands like a ritual, slow and careful, as if the water could carry the years down the drain if he gave it time. In the bedroom, he took the picture from his pocket and set it on the dresser. He didn't talk to it. He didn't have to. The room knew the words. He lay down just before 3 and told his body to rest. It tried to argue, he let it talk, then let it quit. Sleep came in a thin sheet, not heavy enough to keep out the old sounds. Buses, trains, a freight truck 2 streets over, a distant dog telling the night it was not alone. Somewhere between one breath and the next, he dreamed of the hospital bench and the bottle on the windowsill catching light. Near dawn, the neighborhood shook itself awake. A garbage truck groaned and hissed. A bird that wasn't sure what kind of bird it was practiced a tune it didn't quite believe in. Morning came without asking permission. Clarence got up slow and stood at the front window to check the sky, the way men do who have made peace with weather. That's when he saw the black SUV roll to a stop at the curb, quiet as a held breath. The engine cut. The driver's door opened. Sunlight caught on a key fob in a stranger's hand and set it flashing against the glass like a signal meant for him. He didn't move. He felt the new day rearrange itself around a truth he couldn't name yet. He didn't know the man's name, and didn't need it to understand that whatever had started in the hospital the night before had just found his front steps. Chapter 2. Roots and Shadow. He sat in the parked SUV and let the morning crawl over Jackson in slow light, the kind that slipped between porch rails and made old paint look honest. He did not rush the door or the key fob he held. He let the engine click itself quiet and listened to the street. A mail truck groaned 2 blocks down. Somebody's radio leaked a gospel station through a torn screen. The world kept doing what it always did, and he let that steadiness steady him. Elijah Brooks had left this city as a skinny kid with chipped teeth and a head full of questions. He came back a man whose face people recognized on business magazines, though he never liked those covers and never kept them in his house. He had sworn years ago he wouldn't return to Mercy General or to the streets around it. He had sworn off the sound of those elevators, the smell of that antiseptic, the way a waiting room could take your breath and keep it. Swears don't always have the last word. His mother had cleaned offices at night while he slept in the break room with his homework spread over cardboard boxes. He remembered the large trash bin with the squeaky wheel, and the way she pressed a palm to his forehead before the midnight rounds, and again before the sunrise bus. She used to tell him that survival is first a rhythm, and only later a plan. He believed her, though he wanted both. When the church on Farish Street opened a tiny computer lab with donated machines, he lived there after school, jaw set, eyes bright, typing like he could outrun the bills stacked in the kitchen drawer. A retired math teacher named Mr. Cole sat beside him most days, a black man with a silver wedding band he spun when he thought. "Keep your code clean and your word cleaner," he would say, not looking up. Elijah kept both as best he could. There were shadows in his beginnings he didn't pick up like stories at a family cookout. Some were just holes that never filled. He knew the shape of his father's absence, the way you know the sound of a room when the air conditioner cuts off. His mother never called the man by name. She used to fold a letter now and then and tuck it in the same Bible pocket where she kept a bus card and $5 for emergencies. When she got sick, she told Elijah to stop searching for people who had decided not to be found. After she died, he found the letter anyway. It had no address. It had only a name he didn't recognize, and a line that said, "Tell him marigolds are braver than roses." He kept the paper, not because he liked what it said, but because it carried the smudge of her thumb beside that line. He built his first server in a laundry room with 2 extension cords and a fan pointed at the tower so it wouldn't faint from heat. The company came later, almost by accident. He learned early that people respected what they thought they couldn't understand, and he learned late that they feared it too. The investors came with their wide smiles and their hard clauses. The first time someone called him a genius to his face, he was holding a bowl of grocery store peaches and a receipt he had counted twice. He built the company careful, then built a second thing inside it, a promise he kept quiet. When he found somebody giving away what little they had with both hands, he would pay attention, not with a pat on the back, with something that changed the room they lived in. He stared now at the house across the street, the one that had belonged to a man named Clarence Washington, long enough for the steps to know his weight. Elijah had seen the picture in his file, not because he liked files on people, but because the world liked proof when a man with money moved. The house leaned forward the way old houses do when they have listened too hard for too many years. There was a new porch 2 lots down that his crew had finished last week. The marigolds they had planted along the fence were small but brave, nodding their round gold heads like they were saying amen to the morning. He thought about the bottle of water in that bright hospital and the way the janitor had said his name like it wasn't an introduction but a returned coin. Washington. It landed heavy but right. Elijah had not asked for his mother's maiden name after she passed. He learned it in probate court, small print that didn't change what he felt. Still, when Clarence said Washington, something in Elijah leaned forward the way the house did. He didn't know yet if that meant anything. He knew better than to make a story when all you had was a rhyme. He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the key fob and felt the rise of the logo, a small mountain cut into plastic. Money built clean lines and quiet doors. He liked the quiet parts. He didn't care for the way money turned your voice into a microphone even when you were whispering. He had learned to keep what mattered low and close. People thought rich men wanted applause. He wanted silence. He wanted to be able to hear the soft noises of a life he could trust. Coffee pouring, a lamp switching on, the sound of someone he loved breathing beside him before dawn. He had almost had that once. The woman he thought he might marry left a note on his kitchen table under a saucer. "You give everything away," she wrote. "I need someone who knows how to keep." He kept the saucer, threw away the note, and built a habit of not leaving promises where a cup could hide them. He checked his watch and let the second hand make its slow circle. The program he had sketched on a napkin years back kept showing up when he closed his eyes. You pay attention to the quiet people doing loud things for others, and you give them a better map. No cameras, no big checks on a stage, a house here, tuition there, a truck to replace the one that died and took a man's job with it. He had wanted the help to feel like a neighbor knocking at the right time, not like a brand arriving with balloons. The hard part wasn't the giving. The hard part was letting go of control once you gave. If you meant it, you didn't pick the thanks. You let the thanks be whatever it wanted to be, even if that was nothing. He thought of Mercy General again and the bench by the vending machines. He had gone back there after years of staying away because something had snapped inside him, something small as a thread and strong as the bridge it held. He had sat down in that bad chair and closed his eyes and waited to see if he could breathe in a room that had taken his breath the day his mother left him. Then a man with a mop had walked over like he was sent, asked if he was good, and handed him a bottle of water like it was a right, not a favor. That simple. No sermon, no lecture. The water tasted like mercy without a capital M. Elijah felt something settle in his chest that had rattled for years. He reached for the slim leather folder on the passenger seat and opened it. The deed was inside, signed 2 days ago, notarized with a stamp that left a faint star on the bottom corner. Beneath it was a small card with a line he had scribbled and crossed out twice before letting it stand. "You showed me care when I had nothing to show. Let me show you a door you can open with your own hands." He wasn't a man for speeches. He was a man for doors. He caught his own reflection in the dark window of the SUV and thought how odd it was to see his face here, in this old neighborhood where he had learned to make himself small to get through spaces not built to fit him. He didn't feel big now. He felt the size of a man walking toward a thing he believed in, and a thing he feared. He feared that kindness, when you put it on paper, turned into policy and then into performance. He feared he would do more harm than good if he didn't keep listening. He believed that one steady hand on a doorknob could change a house from a place you slept to a place you lived, Both truths sat side by side in him like brothers who didn't agree, but still shared a plate. He slid the folder back into the glove box and rested the keys in his palm. His mind went places it hadn't visited in years. The chapel where he had tried to bargain with a god who didn't sign contracts. The small kitchen where his mother had taught him to stir grits with the patience of a saint. The night a storm took the power, and they lit 2 candles and told each other stories until their voices made the dark kind. He thought of marigolds again and finally understood why his mother had called them brave. You plant them where the sun is hardest and the soil most stubborn, and they still lift their heads like the day owes them beauty. Across the street, a curtain moved and settled. The house he had built down the block held its new porch like a straight spine. He imagined Clarence standing in a doorway somewhere, hands on the frame, measuring this moment with the same eyes he had used in that fluorescent room. Elijah had seen that look before in men who had carried more than their share. Skepticism not mean, just earned. Hope not loud, just careful. He respected that look. You don't win over a neighborhood with blueprints. You win it over one morning at a time. He closed his eyes and said a small thing only he and God would hear. Not a bargain, not a plea. A pledge the size of his own breath. Keep me honest. Keep me small enough to hear. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the new day, keys in hand, the kind of man who remembered where he came from, and the one promise that had survived all the noise. When you see someone pour from an empty cup to lift another soul, you do not clap. You take the weight from their arms and you make a way. Chapter 3. The First Blow. The video broke before breakfast. A grainy, tilted clip hit 3 neighborhood Facebook groups at once, and then bled into a local news producer's inbox like a rumor that had been waiting in the dark for years. No title, no watermark, just 23 seconds of a black man in a linen shirt, pressing a set of keys into the hand of an old janitor on a sun-faded porch in Jackson, Mississippi. 2 words appeared at the end, white text on black like a dare. Quiet justice. By 8, the clip had been reshared with new captions that bent the truth to fit whatever the poster needed. By 9, a blogger in Atlanta called it poverty porn. By 10, 3 corporate brands were in Elijah's email, offering partnerships, hashtags, and a limited edition sneaker drop for impact. The porch, the keys, the faces, what had felt like a private human moment, were now a stage. Elijah watched the clip on mute at his kitchen counter, coffee cooling untouched. The camera had been across the street, low angle, wobble at the start. Someone had filmed from a car, a window half up, then posted without context. He paused on Clarence's hands. They were steady. He paused on his own mouth. He didn't like the way it looked when he smiled on screen. He had always been more comfortable building the room than standing in the doorway. His phone buzzed again. Vanessa. "We need to move," she said. No hello. "Press requests are piling up. If we don't set the frame, someone else will. I've drafted talking points and a donor deck. 2 national outlets want a live segment tonight." Elijah kept his eyes on the frozen frame. "No press," he said. "Not like this." Then a statement, Vanessa pushed. "At minimum. The longer we're silent, the more they'll define us. We can take the brand from charity to movement. The corporate checks will fund 5 years of grants in 5 days." "This isn't a brand," he said. "It's a door you open and then step away from." "It can be both," she said, softer now, as if offering a compromise instead of a pivot. "We don't have to sell the soul to grow the body." He let the silence sit between them until it felt honest. "No cameras," he said. "Write a simple note. We value privacy. We value dignity. We will continue our work quietly. Put that out and nothing more." She sighed, not loud, but enough to tell him she was already writing a longer version in her head. Fine, but we need to prepare for audits, for haters, for bad faith takes. The internet is not a front porch. When the call ended, Elijah stood by the window and watched the day tilt toward heat. A lawnmower droned 2 blocks over. Someone's wind chime clicked like silver teeth. He thought about how attention changes temperature. Good work does best at room temp. Fame runs hot and warps whatever it touches. By noon, the street outside Clarence's house was different. A white sedan idled too long at the corner, then rolled off when a neighbor stared back. A young man with a gimbal and a hungry grin tried to interview the mail carrier. A woman in a branded T-shirt left a gift basket on the step as if suffering could be soothed with organic crackers. Clarence wasn't home. He had gone to pick up Aaliyah from her summer classes and stopped by the church to ask Pastor Jerome how to handle polite strangers who didn't hear the word no. The pastor's office smelled like old wood and lemon oil. Sunlight made mosaics on the carpet through the stained glass. Jerome listened without interrupting, hands folded, elbows on the desk he'd gotten secondhand from a bank that didn't need it anymore. People show up when they think goodness is contagious, he said finally. They want to stand close, catch some on their clothes, then go home and feel taller. That's not always wrong, it's not always right. They want to turn it into a show, Clarence said. He didn't want a show. And neither do you, Jerome said. You wanted a porch quiet enough to hear your wife's picture frame creak when the weather changes. Clarence smiled at that. The pastor had a gift for naming small truths like they were psalms. Jerome leaned back. What does Mr. Brooks want? Less talking, Clarence said. More doors. Then here's my counsel, Jerome said. Keep the doors open and the stage closed. Let the neighborhood set the rules. If the money comes with a script, we decline. If the money comes with respect, we listen. Clarence nodded. He was not a man to argue with wisdom when it felt well worn. Across town, Elijah sat with his legal lead at a narrow conference table, the kind designed to make people say yes. Audit checklists lay between them, receipts, 501c3, filings, vendor contracts. The work had been clean. He kept it clean on purpose. No side deals, no cousins on payroll, but clean didn't mean safe. Vanessa's text lit his phone mid-sentence. City compliance left a voicemail. Something about program scope. Already, Elijah said. Visibility invites inspection, the lawyer answered. Let them look. We have nothing to hide. Elijah believed him. He also knew that the wrong person with the right form could turn a faucet off for months. By 2, the first reporter knocked on Clarence's door. Aaliyah opened it halfway and held her body like a shield. My granddaddy's not giving interviews, she said. I just want a quote, the reporter said, bright and quick. How does it feel to be rescued? Aaliyah's face didn't change. He didn't drown, she said, and closed the door with the care of someone putting a sleeping baby down. In the kitchen, she set her backpack on the table and looked at the new porch like it had built itself overnight. It still felt like a borrowed suit. Right size, new weight. She loved her granddad more than anything left breathing. She also feared what attention does to quiet men. Her phone buzzed with classmates' messages. Some sweet, some sour, and one from a boy who laughed with too many yellow teeth. Ask your rich friend to buy me a car. She put the phone face down and poured iced tea into a glass her grandmother had bought at a yard sale in '99. The glass had a tiny chip at the rim that fit her bottom lip like a memory. At 3, Vanessa called again. I went ahead and scheduled an off-camera briefing with donors, she said, moving fast. Tight list. People we trust. If we don't invite them inside, they'll camp outside. Not yet, Elijah said. Too late, she said. They're already on the calendar at 6. You need to give them something. A roadmap. A name they can put on a gala invite. I can spin Quiet Justice into a quarterly series with field stories and measurable outcomes. Don't spin it, he said. Sew it. What? Stitch it to the people who live here, he said. If they don't approve, it doesn't happen. Vanessa went silent long enough to mean disagreement and then said, I'll loop Pastor Jerome. Loop him first, Elijah said, and last. At 4, an email hit the foundation inbox with the city seal and a subject line that changed the air in the room. Notice of preliminary review. The letter praised the mission with one sentence and then asked 27 questions without warmth. It requested a temporary hold on disbursements until the office could verify alignment with municipal charitable guidelines and anti-solicitation standards. The language had the charm of a locked door. A PDF attachment showed a screenshot of the porch video with a yellow circle around the key handoff. A note at the bottom read, Unclear whether this constitutes an in-kind inducement to solicit further donations without permit. Elijah felt the heat rise behind his eyes, the way it does when you know you're right, and you also know being right won't matter today. He forwarded the letter to legal, to Vanessa, to the tiny circle that made up his whole board. Replies came back in fast fragments. We'll handle, we've seen worse, breathe. He breathed. He wanted to punch a wall he didn't own. He stepped outside and walked the block without a destination. The afternoon leaned toward evening. Sprinklers ticked in hesitant arcs. A dog barked at nothing until nothing barked back. On a chain-link fence, someone had tied a ribbon the color of a ripe mango. He stopped at the new porch 2 lots down and ran his fingers along the rail. Fresh paint made a soft sound under his nail like a violin string learning a note. A car slowed behind him and idled. He didn't turn. He could feel the look without seeing it. It wasn't the look you give a celebrity. It was the look you give a decision and wonder if you will regret it. The car rolled on. On the walk back, he passed the church. The door stood open like it always did when the air cooperated. Pastor Jerome stood in the vestibule arranging folding chairs into a circle. He didn't call out. He didn't need to. You heard? Elijah asked, stepping into the cool. About the letter, Jerome said. Paper has a way of finding me. They want us on pause, Elijah said. Pauses can be holy, Jerome answered. Or they can be tricks. The difference is who holds the remote. Elijah almost smiled. I'm not trying to lead a movement. Good, Jerome said. Movements eat people. Communities feed them. Elijah sat on the nearest chair and let the room receive his weight. He thought of his mother's letter again, the line about marigolds being braver than roses, and of the name he'd never spoken aloud to anyone who could repeat it in a room like this. He wasn't a man to chase ghosts. He knew the living had enough needs. Still, the word Washington kept ringing in his ear like a bell that didn't care if he covered it. Back at the house, Aaliyah sat with Clarence and sorted through the day like laundry. What to keep, what to let go. They want to interview you at church on Sunday, she said, handing him a slip of paper a stranger had pressed into her palm. They say it's positive. Positive, Clarence repeated, like a doctor was about to tell him the kind he didn't want. Granddaddy, you don't owe anybody your story, Aaliyah said. You gave a man a bottle of water. He gave you a door. That's between y'all. He nodded. Between us and whoever's listening when we're not talking, he said, and patted her hand the way his wife used to pat his when he started feeling big feelings and pretending he wasn't. At 5:30, the doorbell rang. Not a reporter this time. A city courier, badge on a lanyard, envelope in hand. The seal on the flap matched the seal on the email. He had Elijah's name and the foundation's address printed neat. Elijah signed where the man pointed and stood there with the weight of official paper in his palm. The courier tipped his cap and left without apology. Rules don't say sorry. Inside, Elijah slit the envelope open and spread the pages on the table. The ink smelled new. The last line carried a sentence that changed information into impact. Effective immediately. Disbursements from the accounts identified in Appendix A are to be frozen pending completion of preliminary review. Appendix A took up 2 pages. He recognized every account number. He knew which families would feel the pause like a pulled plug. He put both hands on the table and lowered his head the way a man does when he is deciding whether his next move will be humble or loud. He could write personal checks and do this the hard old way. He could go on television and dare the city to say no to a story that made people cry. He could call 3 billionaires who owed him favors and flood the zone until money became pressure and pressure became compliance. He didn't do any of that. He listened. In the quiet, he heard the softest sound, the clink of a glass in the sink, the sigh of a house cooling, the slow turn of his own breath. Then he gathered the papers into a clean stack, placed them back in the envelope, and looked at the last page again. The anonymous complainant's email address had been redacted, except for one careless oversight. A subject line fragment at the very top where the clerk had copied and pasted badly. 4 words sat there like a fingerprint no one meant to leave. Quiet justice is branding. He stared at the phrase until the letters lost their shape and became only noise. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed and a voice laughed too loud. By sundown, the accounts were frozen. Chapter 4. Clashes and Trials. By morning, the kindness had a price tag. Meetings filled the calendar like rain clouds, and every cloud carried a question Elijah didn't want to answer out loud. Who gets to own good? The foundation office on Farish Street had the look of a place still figuring itself out. Second-hand chairs, a long folding table dressed up with a clean runner, 2 lamps that didn't match but shook hands across a bowl of green apples. Vanessa stood at the whiteboard with a stack of colored markers and a certainty that could sell winter coats in July. "We build a ladder," she said, drawing boxes that climbed toward a square labeled National. Quarterly impact reports, donor salons, curated field stories. We turn quiet justice into a repeatable model. Elijah watched her handwriting lean forward like it was late for something. He liked Vanessa. He respected her speed, her instincts, her refusal to take no from a door that was clearly unlocked. He also heard a hum underneath her pitch, the old song money sings when it meets a mirror. "No stage," he said, and his voice came out steady, not sharp. "No salons. We stay small, or we grow wrong." "Small is a mood, not a strategy," she answered, softer now, trying to turn speed into care. "The accounts are frozen, donors are jumpy. We need structure that calms their hearts and opens their wallets. People don't give to uncertainty." He thought of the letter with its official seal and its cold praise. He thought of the phrase someone had typed and a clerk had forgotten to hide. Quiet justice is branding. He let the words pass through him like bad weather, felt them, didn't build a house under them. A knock at the glass brought the room down from air to earth. Pastor Jerome walked in with the slow authority of a man who has learned to let silence do the first 5 minutes of talking. He wore his Sunday suit on a weekday and carried a small Bible that had survived 3 funerals and 2 floods. He shook Elijah's hand, then Vanessa's, and sat at the table like it was his kitchen. "If this belongs to the neighborhood," he said, "the neighborhood needs keys, not just a tour." Vanessa uncapped a marker like a flourish. "We've drafted a community advisory council." Advisory is a nice word for no teeth, Jerome said, not unkind. A vote is a tooth, a veto is a jaw. Elijah almost smiled. He's not wrong. I rarely am, Jerome said, then leaned in. Let the church, the clinic, and the school each hold a key. If 2 of the 3 say no, it's no. If 2 say yes, it's yes. Put it in writing. Then I'll ask my people to sit down and listen with both ears. Vanessa breathed in like she was counting to 10. That slows us down. That keeps us honest, Jerome replied. Speed is how you crash a good car on a clean road. The door opened again. Clarence stepped in, hat in his hands, Aaliyah a step behind him, her book bag slung across one shoulder like a promise. He didn't sit. He didn't need a chair to be heard. I brought you names, he said, and laid a black and white composition notebook on the table, as if it held something alive. Not stories for your camera. Folks who need a door now. Elijah opened the notebook. The handwriting walked steady across the page. Miss Erlene, 79, keeps 3 grandbabies. Fridge broke last month, still feeding half the block. Mr. Hines, 64, bus driver, engine died, walks 2 miles to depot at 4 a.m. Tasha from Mercy, worked doubles all summer, pays for her sister's boys' inhalers cash. Aaliyah pointed to one line drawn in sharper ink. That's Mr. Lionel, she said. He fixes bikes in his yard for the kids. Won't take money. Says he's just keeping his hands busy since Miss Rhea passed. Elijah ran his finger under the names like a prayer. The room changed temperature. The boxes on the whiteboard faded to background. There were people breathing inside these lines. We'll find a way, he said, even with the freeze. Vanessa's jaw tightened. A way within the law, she said. We can't risk the whole thing for a few quick wins. Jerome turned to her, gentle but firm. Wins don't live in spreadsheets. They live in kitchens and on porches. The foundation's accountant, Malik, poked his head in from the hall. He was tall, soft-spoken, the kind of man who noticed what other people's eyes slid past. Elijah, got a minute? He asked, but his eyes slid to the notebook like it was medicine and he had been sick a long time. In here, Elijah said. Go on. Malik stepped in, closed the door with a careful hand, and set a folder by the apples. I've been mapping what we can and can't do during the hold, he said. I also checked pending invoices for anything that could be paused without hurting people. He spread 2 printouts. The first was a tidy list of rent stipends, utility payments, tuition checks, all marked red with a thin line through each like a teacher grading the city's idea of compassion. The second was shorter. 3 invoices to a brand consultancy Elijah didn't recognize. What's Eastline Strategies? Elijah asked. Vanessa's eyes didn't blink. A bench contract, she said quickly. Preliminary work, narrative audit, donor positioning, crisis prep. We needed to be ready once the story broke. 3 invoices, Malik said, tapping the page, dated within 2 weeks. Same amount to the dollar. Wire instructions to a bank in Atlanta. LLC formed 3 weeks ago. No website. Registered agent shares an address with a shell that services influencer campaigns. Vanessa kept her voice level. We moved fast because we had to. It's all within limits. I signed under marketing. Elijah felt the air thin. Not because a contract existed, he knew the price of operating in a loud world, but because the numbers ran in a rhythm that didn't sound like his. He looked at Malik. Malik held his gaze, a quiet steel there that made him wish the man had been in the room earlier. There's more, Malik said. He slid a single-page printout across the table. A calendar screenshot. Color-coded blocks. A familiar blue line drawn around 6 p.m. Donor briefing, quiet justice. Under it, a private note he wouldn't have seen if the invite had been scrubbed. exploratory, licensing options with corporate partner if naming rights secured. Vanessa reached for the page and stopped when Elijah's hand landed on it first. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. When a man who loves silence speaks, the room makes space. "You're already in talks to sell the name," he said, not a question. "Not sell," she answered, too quick to be believed. "Protect, expand. If we don't take the wheel, someone else will drive this off a cliff. Elijah, scale isn't evil, it's reach. Imagine 100 porches, 1,000. 1,000 done wrong breaks more than it builds," he said, and he heard the tired in his own voice like a bruise he'd been ignoring. Jerome stood, hands on the back of his chair. "Daughter, the fastest way to lose a harvest is to pave the field." Vanessa's eyes flashed, hurt and heat in the same second. "I grew up without fields," she said, the truth landing between them like a plate on tile. "I know what it costs to be small. I'm trying to make sure we don't die of our own humility." No one answered. Somewhere outside, a siren wound up, climbed, and fell away. The apples in the bowl looked suddenly like props. Elijah closed the folder, and the calendar printout disappeared under his palm. He wanted to believe the best version of everyone in the room, including himself. He also knew that belief without boundaries turned into a lie with good manners. He looked at Clarence. The old man met his eyes and gave the smallest nod, a permission to choose the harder road. "We pause everything that isn't a human bill," Elijah said at last. "Eastline invoices are on hold pending review. No donor briefing until the neighborhood has a vote on structure. Pastor, can you gather church, clinic, school leaders by Friday?" "I can," Jerome said. "They'll come if they feel seen." Vanessa exhaled through her nose, a fighter resetting between rounds. "You're making a mistake," she said. Not cruel, just convinced. "We'll drown in goodwill and paperwork." "We'll learn to breathe underwater," Elijah said. They broke then, not in anger, but in the way a day breaks when it has been asked to carry more than it should. Clarence and Aaliyah left first, the notebook back under Clarence's arm like a tucked child. Jerome promised texts and calls and disappeared into heat bright enough to make the asphalt blink. Vanessa stayed behind to erase boxes from the board, her marker running out of ink on the word national until it faded to ghost. Malik waited in the doorway. When the room was empty, he stepped close enough for only one man to hear. "I ran the state registry," he said quietly. "Eastline's registered agent is tied to a management firm that lists a senior partner with a different last name. But her first name is the same as Vanessa's. It's not proof. It's a shadow." Elijah didn't move for a long breath. He had asked for trials. He had received riddles. He looked at the folder in his hand and felt the edge press his skin. Outside, the afternoon shifted toward gold. Inside, one truth stood up and waited to be named. "Show me everything," he said. Malik nodded once. "You'll have it by nightfall." Chapter 5. First Culmination. By noon, the first loss arrived, dressed like paperwork. The city's hold hardened into policy, and what had been an inconvenience turned into a wall. Phones that used to ring with thank yous now rang with questions that felt like accusations. Elijah stood in the foundation office and watched the printer spit out a letter that made good work sound like misconduct. It asked for more forms, more proof, more patience from people who had already run out of it. The room smelled of dry marker and lemon cleaner. Vanessa moved like weather, fast and persuasive, a folder in each hand and a plan in every sentence. She had called the board, 3 donors, and a lawyer before coffee cooled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her certainty filled the corners. "We can't limp through this," she said, laying out her documents like cards. We freeze all field disbursements until the review clears. We issue a unified message, and we leverage the attention. If we accept the corporate partnership, we'll cover every name in Clarence's notebook inside of 1 quarter. Scale is mercy.